That's really difficult to say. So we have a lot of anecdotal evidence that mistreatment of migrants is an important phenomenon, but it's very hard to have quantitative data on this phenomenon. So migrants are typically hard to reach, and even if you're able to reach some of these like migrant populations, they might not be willing to talk about their experiences. So what we did in the Philippines is we conducted a survey, a representative survey, with domestic workers who leave the Philippines and then work in Saudi Arabia and Hong Kong. And these domestic workers are really a very vulnerable migrant population. They live, with their employers 24/7. Often employers confiscate their phones. They might not even be allowed to leave the house. So they're really at the mercy of their employers. And what we find is that many of them really report mistreatment and contract violations. So for instance, 27% of those said that they did not receive their salary on time. 60% said that they were not allowed to leave the house, even though that was specified in the contract. Also, many of them didn't get the day off, which was specified in the contract. 8% even reported physical violence from the side of the employer, and 5% even sexual harassment. So it's really stark and very sad numbers. So it is certainly a very important phenomenon. It's very hard to quantify. And even though I've shared these numbers for domestic workers in the Middle East, there's no reason to believe that this phenomenon is limited to migrant workers in the Philippines who go and work in the Gulf countries or other places in Asia. I think that's a worldwide phenomenon. So it's a really good question. It's a difficult question. So in principle, it's really the host countries who are responsible for implementing and enforcing laws and regulations, that protect migrants from mistreatment on behalf of their employers. But, as it happens, many host countries don't really enforce these regulations. They don't really prioritize the well-being or the welfare of migrant workers. They're more accountable to the employers. And even if some host countries are, more willing to protect migrant workers, there's also this problem that many migrant workers are not willing or may think they're not able to go forward and report their employers because, in some instances, their visas might be tied to specific employers. So it's really hard to, also encourage migrants to come forward. Now, you might say maybe, the countries of origin can do something about it. And often, they have an interest to protect their citizens abroad. But the key challenge here is that they cannot implement and not enforce any policies abroad, right? That's just beyond their sphere of influence. So it's really a very difficult policy challenge to address in this context. And one potential alternative is that you implement some interventions that migrants can implement themselves without the help of source countries or without the help of host countries. Yeah, so one idea we explored together with the government of the Philippines was a simple intervention that aims to protect domestic workers who leave the Philippines and then work in Saudi Arabia and Hong Kong from mistreatment. So what we did is really very simple. So we encouraged domestic workers to bring a small gift from the Philippines, so just a pack of dried mangoes, and show their employers a photo of their family on their first day of arrival. So this is a very simple intervention. The idea is really that it aims to humanize the worker. It shows the employer that, the migrant is a human being with a personal background too, has a family too, and comes with good intention. And the intervention basically builds on simple insights from behavioral economics that have shown that if you reduce the social distance between two parties, that increases trust and pro-social behavior between these two parties. And that's basically the foundation of this intervention. And we tested this intervention in a randomized control trial. So we have a treatment group that received these instructions and a control group that did not receive these instructions. And we found that this intervention was indeed effective. So it helped to reduce mistreatment. The domestic workers who received these instructions were also more satisfied with their relation with the employer, and they were also more likely to renew their contract and stay with the employer. So there's some evidence for positive effects of this intervention, which could be implemented unilaterally by domestic workers. So there is this positive evidence, but at the same time, of course, that's no game changer. That's no solution to the problem. It helps to reduce the problem, but not eliminate the problem. So it should only be seen as a complementary strategy. And of course, the host countries and the employers are still the key players and the ones who are actually responsible for tackling this problem. So I think, this simple intervention on behalf of migrants, which can be implemented unilaterally despite all the constraints they face, can only be a tiny bit of the overall solution. And of course, it still takes changes in the legal framework in institutions to really tackle this question in the long run.